Today, the United States of America is changing its relationship with the people of Cuba. In the most significant changes in our policy in more than 50 years, we will end an outdated approach that for decades has failed to advance our interests, and instead, we will begin to normalize relations between our two countries. I've instructed Secretary Kerry to immediately begin discussions with Cuba to reestablish diplomatic relations that have been severed since January of 1961. Going forward, the United States will reestablish an embassy in Havana, and high-ranking officials will visit Cuba. Where we can advance shared interests, we will, on issues like health, migration, counterterrorism, drug trafficking, and disaster response.
Large crowds also marching through the streets of Philadelphia tonight. It all comes just hours after President Obama acknowledges emotions are running high while also appealing for calm. And the very moment he says that is the very moment violence really starts to erupt in Ferguson. Watch this.
Good evening, everybody. As all of you know, a few minutes ago, the grand jury deliberating the death of Michael Brown issued its decision. It's now come that either way was going to be subject of intense disagreement, not only in Ferguson, but across America. So I just want to say a few words suggesting how we might move forward. First and foremost, we are a nation built on the rule of law. And so we need to accept that this decision was the grand jury's to make. There are Americans who agree with it, and there are Americans who are deeply disappointed, even angry. It's an understandable reaction. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully. Let me repeat Michael's father's words. Hurting others or destroying property is not the answer. No matter what the grand jury decides, I do not want my son's death to be in vain. I want it to lead to incredible change, positive change, change that makes the St. Louis region better for everyone. Now, Michael Brown's parents have lost more than anyone. We should be honoring their wishes. I also appeal to the law enforcement officials in Ferguson and the region to show care and restraint in managing peaceful protests that may occur. Understand, our police officers put their lives on the line for us every single day. They've got a tough job to do to maintain public safety and hold accountable those who break the law. As they do their jobs in the coming days, they need to work with the community, not against the community, to distinguish the handful of people who may use the grand jury's decision as an excuse for violence, distinguish them from the vast majority who just want their voices heard around legitimate issues in terms of how communities and law enforcement interact. Finally, we need to recognize that the situation in Ferguson speaks to broader challenges that we still face as a nation. The fact is, in too many parts of this country, a deep distrust exists between law enforcement and communities of color. Some of this is the result of the legacy of racial discrimination in this country. And this is tragic because nobody needs good policing more than poor communities with higher crime rates. The good news is we know there are things we can do to help. And I've instructed Attorney General Holder to work with cities across the country to help build better relations between communities and law enforcement. That means working with law enforcement officials to make sure their ranks are representative of the communities they serve. We know that makes a difference. It means working to train officials so that law enforcement conducts itself in a way that is fair to everybody. It means enlisting the community actively on what should be everybody's goal, and that is to prevent crime. And there are good people on all sides of this debate, as well as in both Republican and Democratic parties, that are interested not only in lifting up best practices because we know that there are communities who've been able to deal with this in an effective way, but also who are interested in working with this administration and local and state officials to start tackling much needed criminal justice reform. So those should be the lessons that we draw from these tragic events. We need to recognize that this is not just an issue for Ferguson, this is an issue for America. We have made enormous progress in race relations over the course of the past several decades. I have witnessed that in my own life, and to deny that progress, I think, is to deny America's capacity for change. But what is also true is that there are still problems, and communities of color aren't just making these problems up. Separating that from this particular decision, there are issues in which the law too often feels as if it is being applied in a discriminatory fashion. I don't think that's the norm. I don't think that's true for the majority of communities or the vast majority of law enforcement officials, but these are real issues. And we have to lift them up and not deny them or try to tamp them down. What we need to do is to understand them and figure out how do we make more progress. And that can be done. That won't be done by throwing bottles. That won't be done by smashing car windows. That won't be done by using this as an excuse to vandalize property, and it certainly won't be done by hurting anybody. So to those in Ferguson, there are ways of channeling your concerns constructively, and there are ways of channeling your concerns destructively. Michael Brown's parents understand what it means to be constructive. The vast majority of peaceful protesters, they understand it as well. Those of you who are watching tonight understand that there's never an excuse for violence, particularly when there are a lot of people in goodwill out there who are willing to work on these issues. On the other hand, those who are only interested in focusing on the violence and just want the problem to go away need to recognize that we do have work to do here, and we shouldn't try to paper it over. Whenever we do that, the anger may momentarily subside, but over time it builds up, and America isn't everything that it could be. And I am confident that if we focus our attention on the problem and we look at what has happened in communities around the country effectively, then we can make progress not just in Ferguson, but in a lot of other cities and communities around the country. Okay.
Mr. President, will you go to Ferguson when things settle down there?
Well, yeah, let's take a look and see how things are going. Eric Holder's been there. We've had a whole team from the Justice Department there, and I think that they have done some very good work. As I said, the vast majority of the community has been working very hard to try to make sure that this becomes an opportunity for us to seize the moment and turn this into a positive situation. But I think that we have to make sure that we focus at least as much attention on all those positive activities that are taking place as we do on a handful of folks who end up using this as an excuse to misbehave or to break the law or to engage in violence. I think that it's going to be very important, and I think the media is going to have a responsibility as well to make sure that we focus on Michael Brown's parents and the clergy and the community leaders and the civil rights leaders and the activists and law enforcement officials who have been working very hard to try to find better solutions, long-term solutions to this issue. There is inevitably going to be some negative reaction and it'll make for good TV. But what we want to do is to make sure that we're also focusing on those who can offer the kind of real progress that we know is possible. That the vast majority of people in Ferguson, the St. Louis region, in Missouri, and around the country are looking for. And I want to be partners with those folks, and we need to lift up that kind of constructive dialogue that's taking place. All right?
Thank you very much. Charges, Mr. President.
Salvation for this sin is the gospel. The only way to really cure that what's on the inside is understanding that Jesus Christ died for our sins. And so to me, on a micro level, it's understanding.
Oh, and just like that, we lost him. I know.
There's a better one of him. It wasn't photoshopped or anything, but it is. It's not a hoax, but the video's not a hoax, but it is a balloon. And as Grindle was saying, it doesn't matter if it's a balloon or it's just a horse in the sky, right? Like the apocalypse, yeah? Is this a sign? We don't know. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, it's very strange, right? And like I said, unless you've been drinking and you're drunk as a skunk, the next day you see this thing flying through the sky, something very strange about a balloon. It's shaped like a horse. It's supposedly gold balloons, and it turns into a black horse. Very strange, guys, very strange. I know it broke off in the wind, but that's what they're saying. This guy is going nuts. I would too. I would too. Look at it. I'm sure that those legs moved on that balloon. Anyway, I won't play all of it, but I'll leave the links to it, yeah? Because they've got a better one here. You can play it, but there's no... I couldn't find where it was on YouTube, because let's see. So, that's it. They reckon it's that, right? Some kids are playing with it. It's a big balloon, right? It was in Saudi Arabia. People, I think that bloke that took the video said, you know, like he saw a horse, yeah? But they're saying, no, it's a balloon. But you know, is this a sign? Like, is this... I don't know. It's very strange that they'd have a horse let go. I mean, wow. That's weird, eh, guys?
And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine.
Hi, good morning and welcome to today's Products in Focus. Most global markets are still on the downside. You can see here just the incredible volatility that we had there in the US 30, having spiked up earlier on in the morning there after coming off. You can see this massive rebound, only to get pushed all the way back down again. One of the most aggressive moves I've seen on the US 30 for some time, where it's been up so much to only retreat back down to negative territory. We're on the wrong side of potential support / resistance at 17,546. Next potential support is at 17,361. This is a real ugly candle formation we have right here. Looking at the UK 100, the pain just got piled on later on in that session. Where that sell-off continued as the rout in oil kind of spilled over, really hurting a lot of like BP, Shell, Premier Oil, a number of other oil companies, a lot of mining companies as well, who've got big stakes in energy, BHP, Rio. All the miners got really badly hurt yesterday as well, and now we're at 6,400. This is quite negative as well, because we've broken below a psychological level. Let me just go ahead and draw that on. That was a broken potential resistance, which now was expected to act as a potential support. It didn't. All it's acting now is a cap, stopping the UK 100 from breaking up higher. 64.15 is that potential resistance level. Longer term potential support is at 60.73. And crude oil actually broke $60 overnight, but we'll come back to that in a second. Japan 225 managed to rally back up to potential resistance 17,496. Again capped. Long-legged candles yesterday, another long-legged candle today, as dollar yen has managed to, well, the US dollar managed to make up some lost ground against the Japanese yen, but not a huge amount. And we had some data come out from China as well, which was okay. Retail sales was better than expected, but industrial production was worse than expected. A real kind of mishmash, and it looks to be that a lot of economies now are looking at this plunging oil price as being an issue in regards to deflation, where they're worried that now people will not be buying quite so many goods, and they want people to be spending more money, and obviously the price of oil impacts the prices of consumer goods to a certain degree, so people are buying the same amount but actually ends up costing them less. That can have problems for the economy as well. So looking at dollar yen, you can see the volatility we had yesterday. We're trying to push on that a little bit higher today. The US dollar wants to go higher. Ultimately, the fundamentals behind the greenback are a lot more positive than the Eurozone, for example, where they're talking about stimulus and cutting back. Potential resistance is going to be at 119. We ticked our head above there yesterday, again there today. Fingers crossed we're actually able to get our head above that again to be able to re-challenge 121.80. So moving on to crude oil, West Texas. It broke 59.50, which is obviously a level we've been looking at for quite a while. The next potential resistance is quite a bit further away. I need to go into my weekly charts here for a second to really try and find something more suitable. People ask me, well, where's the floor in this? Obviously, it's wherever the Saudis want it to be. I think you can probably pick out a level there of around about $55 potentially. Maybe we can even, no, it's probably, to be fair, I probably have it around here. So around about $54.80. That's going to be as a next potential level for us to go ahead and have a look at. So could be acting as a cap now at 59.50. It's very, very low for crude oil. We know we were at 120 not long ago. So very interesting to see how that pans out. Gold has lost some of its momentum, albeit we are obviously still trading above 2018. That's going to be the next potential support. This could be a retracement for us to re-challenge 1242. Ultimately, I don't think the rally on gold has got like a lot of longevity left in it. Interest rates, US dollar will come back into focus at some point, albeit there has been an extended period of profit taking after such strong rallies across most of those other FX markets. So gold already down today, though it is quite volatile. As soon as safe haven status elements come into play for Japanese yen and gold, this could still be quite interesting, and people are certainly looking a little bit more fearful out there in regards to the short-term moves on the equity markets, especially when you look at the chart here for the UK 100. It's not looking very pretty at all. So finishing up there with Euro USD, reversal yesterday, dipping down again today. As ever, one spot 23.79 is going to be that pivot area. Break below that, we are looking at one spot 20.47 as the next potential support level. Now there's not much happening for the rest of December in regards to economic announcements, but there is, well, even today there is PPI from the US and then the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey, which could be interesting. If you're looking at dollar yen, euro dollar or cable, those are the figures you want to be aware of. Finishing up there with GBP USD, actually a little bit of a reversal compared to euro dollar, but we had a re-challenge, one spot 57.43. It's ticking down ever so slightly now, but it's almost the last couple of sessions almost a mirror image of what's come out of euro dollar, so we might actually have a bit of momentum here. So this could be kind of interesting as a potential breakout at one spot 57.43. Depends where the UK sits versus the other countries out there. So we've already covered coming out today. Let's see what's actually happening on Monday. Not a huge amount. Tuesday, you've got a whole host of UK data: UK CPI, PPI, ZEW business report from Germany. So if you're a euro-dollar cable trader, there's certainly enough to keep you going. I can see the UK market's already opened up, and the UK miners have taken another tumble. Royal Dutch Shell down again as that oil price continues to hit equity markets right across the globe.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. There are growing concerns about food insecurity in the developing world. Rising food prices, weather emergencies, and political problems are deepening the struggles of families in many countries. 3 United Nations agencies published a report before World Food Day in October. This year's State of Food Insecurity in the World report says high prices are likely to continue. Gregory Barrow with the World Food Program in Rome says, if you look at the places where World Food Program works, particularly in developing countries, you see populations of people who might be spending 60, 70, 80% of their salaries on purchasing food for their families. The report says even short-term price increases can have a long-term effect. Reducing nutritious food early in a child's life can affect mental and physical development and limit future earnings. The United Nations has programs aimed at reducing the number of hungry people in the world by 50% by 2015. But most observers say this target is unlikely to be reached. East Africa is suffering its worst drought in years. In Kenya, at least 3.5 million people are going hungry, mostly in the north. Yet food is going to waste in central Kenya. Now, farmers there want the government to buy their food and get it to those in need. Farmers say bad roads and a lack of transportation make it difficult for them to get their produce to market. Storage is another problem, and they complain about a big drop in food prices. Nahashan Gitao farms almost 3 hectares, about a 90-minute drive from Nairobi. He says he regrets that he wastes at least 25% of his harvest while other Kenyans are hungry. He says the government should buy his food at a good price instead of asking for food from overseas. Economists say the imports reduce local food prices, decrease productivity, and increase dependency among the people. Mr. Gitao says if he could receive higher prices for his crops, he could feed more Kenyans. A Kinangop district official said her office does not get enough money from the central government to improve roads and take other steps to help farmers reach markets. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
Zero Hedge ran a story that most people will never see or really understand. Zero Hedge reported that the Russians have sold off half their US Treasury bonds over the past year. China has been dumping their dollar holdings too, but still have over $1 trillion left. Other foreigners have been dumping their dollars too. The current US inflation rate is 12%. Ben Bernanke has been creating trillions of dollars to bail out banks in Europe, to buy worthless securities from US banks, and to fund the US debt. That will accelerate inflation. Inflation will go from 12% to 15% and then 20% in less than a year. The media will no longer be able to repeat the lie that the inflation rate is only 3.5%. Inflation will become an issue in the 2012 races for Congress, Senate, and the presidency. Accelerating inflation will force people overseas to dump any dollars they receive for selling American food, clothes, electronics, cars, oil, and other raw materials as soon as the transaction is completed. This phenomenon is called an increase in the velocity of money. It is a sign your economy is transitioning from an inconveniently high rate of inflation to hyperinflation. The US dollar is an international reserve currency, which means that if France wants to buy food from Brazil, they will likely have to use the US dollar to make that transaction. In colonial America, the colonists had to earn British pounds or gold to buy something from overseas. Michael Hudson, in his book Super Imperialism, described how the US was funding its wars by inflating the supply of currency used to settle trade. Since World War II, we have been getting real goods like cars and clothes from foreigners in exchange for increasingly worthless paper. When Hudson explained this to the Pentagon, a general said, "Wow, we are ripping people off." I would define hyperinflation as beginning at around 25% for an international reserve currency like the dollar. That is why when inflation surged in the latter part of the Carter presidency in 1979 to 80, Chairman of the Federal Reserve Paul Volcker raised interest rates. Home mortgages went to 15.5%. Ben Bernanke cannot raise interest rates today. His only option would be to devalue the dollar, which is what he said he would do in the now infamous speech he made in Washington, D.C. on the 21st of the 11th, 2002. That means after the 2012 elections, the Russians, the Chinese, Iran, Venezuela, plus their client states and a few other nations can and will force a devaluation of the dollar by refusing to accept Federal Reserve notes in international trade. If Americans balk, China just has to dump $100 billion and buy commodities, driving the price of food out of the reach of Walmart shoppers. Of course, I realize the Chinese will be doing just what the bankers want them to do. An international conference will be held at which the dollar will be devalued by about 40%, as predicted by Bernanke. This will complete that 50% pay cut I've been predicting. The Chinese will have dumped most of their dollars before the conference so that their economy will not be harmed by a dollar devaluation. If Americans can't afford to buy Chinese products, China will just sell them to people whose currencies were revalued upwards. I would suggest you buy storable food, silver coins, not collectibles, and household items that will just increase in cost. Of course, this was all planned long ago by the bankers.